The pandemic has been difficult for many sectors of the economy, but the ones that have been hit the hardest are physical businesses, reliant on people gathering indoors for extended periods of time. That means consumer-facing businesses like restaurants, bars, and movie theaters, but also companies that serve businesses, like the offices many of us no longer commute to every day. My next guest is Nicole Maddox. In 2018, she opened a franchise of the co-working company Office Evolution in Stamford, Connecticut. Her business was quickly depleted when the pandemic hit the United States, forcing her to close her franchise. Nicole, thank you very much for joining us. First, could you tell me a little bit about why your business was one of the ones that was so vulnerable?
Well, the business was co-working. And as you know, once the pandemic hit and various states were told the stay-at-home orders were put in place, many people felt unsafe to come out. Many people felt like the work that they could do in the office could also be done at home, and so they started to do that. So people weren't looking for space in quite the same way that they were before. However, others also sort of figured out, I can't work at home, I've got kids at home, I do need space. So we were sort of in this back and forth period for a while when the virus hit. The bigger issue really came with the businesses within our space who were being forced to close themselves. Thus, they didn't have a need for space.
Right. So where was your business heading before the coronavirus, and then what happened?
So before the coronavirus, we were actually finally hitting that point that every business strives toward. We were getting leads in on a regular basis. People were looking for space. We were becoming known. Our marketing was finally working. So we were in a good place. In fact, January was probably one of the best months that we had had in the almost 2 years since we opened.
So when this happened, you tried pretty much everything. You turned to the government, your franchisor company, your landlord to find some kind of relief, maybe find some kind of a deal. So what was the response that you got?
We sort of saw the writing on the wall in February when businesses started pulling back, saying, you know what, I'm going to hold off for a little bit on taking the space, or we're going to, cancel our meeting for now. And so at that point, we went to the landlord and we said, look, things aren't looking good for us right now. Is there any way that we could work together to get us through this? We also, worked with the franchisor to come up with solutions, some ideas, and we just kept hitting walls.
The franchise company, Office Evolutions, sent us this statement from their founder and CEO, quote, "Our purpose is to support small businesses, and our hearts break when one of our franchisees' locations must close." What's your response to that?
Well, I know that a lot of fellow franchisees who are also and are still in the same situation. For us, it's a little difficult. I mean, the franchisor took the position once we closed that since we closed one location, that we lost the other 4. We had originally signed up for 5 locations. So initially the thought was, well, maybe we'll be able to bounce back from this since people are still looking for space and have to find ways and places to work. But the franchise actually took the opportunity to sort of take back the other 4, leaving us basically with nothing. And they actually aren't willing to refund us for the 4 other locations that we paid for either. So we're sort of out on many levels here. It was just sort of one hit after another.
So where has all this left you? And with regard to the government, what do you think they could have done to help you a little more?
I've got sympathy here. I know that everybody was sort of working, not knowing what was coming next, sort of making it up as they went along. And I totally understand that. The issue is that the funds that came, we did get PPP, but our model had us with 1 employee, which allowed us to be able to keep her employed for that 8-week period and then a little bit beyond. But the funds that were available to us didn't take into account some of the large overhead costs, like the rent, like the services that we needed in order to be able to provide for our members. And so it covered none of that. It really didn't do much at all. We eventually applied for EIDL, which was another form of government assistance. But ironically, that just came in 2 weeks ago, and our doors have been closed now for months. So a lot of it was too little, too late. I spent a lot of time reaching out to local organizations that had grant money in the wake of the civil unrest and everything related to George Floyd, there were a lot of resources that began to open, but none of them came through fast enough. And that was the difficulty. I am grateful for one huge resource that we were able to get. The law firm of Wiggin and Dana offered us pro bono legal services to help us through the lawsuit that we had to endure from the landlord who eventually sued us when we fell behind on the rent.
Nicole, this pandemic has been so devastating. Just very quickly, what has been the effect of this on you personally, not just on your business?
It has been a stressful year, to say the least. And I know that's the case for everybody, but this was, a big dream, something that is really putting my everything into and thoroughly enjoying the opportunity to help small businesses within my business. And now it's sort of left me with nothing. I've got huge debt lost from the money invested that's gone now. We've got an SBA loan now that has to be repaid, but with no funding to do so. And it just feels it's devastating. I'm left with nothing. I've got a family with 4 children, and just trying to figure out what to do next is the difficult part here.
Well, Nicole, our hearts go out to you, and we really hope that this turns around in the not-too-distant future. Nicole Maddox, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jill Johnson joins me now with more. She is the CEO of the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership. Jill, my understanding is that it's your job to try to guide and help people like Nicole Maddox in these difficult times. You did hear that interview just now, right?
I did, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. But I want to ask you, we asked her a question, to ask you a question before that. And I'll warn you, it's a tough question. She wanted to know, how do you recover personally after being on the road to success, only to have it all wiped away with no forgiveness on the loans she took out to fund the company?
Yeah, and that is a tough one. You know, the first thing I would say is allow yourself to be upset. Allow yourself time, in a sense, to mourn your business. It's tough. And so give yourself that space, but then really take time to think about how you can come back better, how you can do things differently. So one, she mentioned that her franchisor was not willing to continue to work with her, essentially. So can she renew this business model and pick things up without being under a franchise? Can she do this on her own? Can she take what she learned, not violating any sort of, agreements that she has with them, but can she do this in a different way? Is there an opportunity to find another space where a landlord has lost tenants? Can she move into another location where the rent might be more favorable? So, my best advice is to pick up the pieces and think about how you can do things differently given the knowledge that you now have.
So help us understand more about why this pandemic has been so painful for small businesses and which types of businesses are being hit the hardest.
Well, if you think about it, small businesses, just like any business, relies on customers. And so if you don't have the customers who are walking through your door, who are walking by your location, it's really tough. It's tough for businesses operating at 100% capacity, but operating at a very minimal capacity, the numbers just don't work for a lot of businesses. And when you think about businesses that were undercapitalized to start, often businesses owned by people of color who had fewer resources from the very beginning, it's tough to hold on. In order to hold on, you need capital. You need that money in the bank that you can draw from to pay the expenses when you don't have the revenue coming in. If you don't have that, it's tough to hold on.
Jill, let's look at the challenges that come from the way the government is trying to help companies. Nicole got a PPP loan, but it only covered her one employee for 8 weeks. Nothing after that, nothing for her overhead. Is there any aid for companies already shut down by the virus?
I don't know about shut down, but if you think about the way that it was structured, it was called PPP, Paycheck Protection. It wasn't called, business saving grants or loans. Right. or support. It was to keep people from going onto unemployment. And so the support really wasn't there for the business overall. In some cases, it might have been best for the business to lay off their employees for a time period to conserve cash. That wasn't the way that the loan really was structured. So for many businesses, they were just sort of left out, trying to figure out the best way that they could, how to survive.
What is your advice to business owners on planning for trying to survive the rest of this pandemic and even for what comes after?
Yeah, I think that something that Nicole did that was very smart is not just looking at the capital and the money, but also looking at the resources. She mentioned she got an attorney to help out with the legal support that she needed. There are business professionals that are out there that have tremendous expertise. If you can get that expertise, get people to help you to figure out a new way to move forward, or again, give you the help and expertise that you need. That's another way to supplement the money that you may have, or if you don't get any, it's still a way to get resources that you need to survive.
Okay, good advice. Jill Johnson from the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership, trying to keep our nation's entrepreneurs with their heads above water. Thank you so much, Jill.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.